So thank you all very much for joining us today. I am really excited to facilitate this conversation. Our focus today will be discussing how a few of our partners in higher education are applying CQ in curricular and co-curricular settings and how CQ translates to global career competencies. Hopefully you'll all walk away with actionable ideas for integrating CQ into your programs beyond study abroad, across disciplines and departments. We'll leave around 10 to 15 minutes for questions. So please, if you have a question or a comment, you can post it in the chat and we will work to answer all the questions by the end of the session today. Before we introduce our panelists, if you're new to the CQ Center, the concept of cultural intelligence, CQ is the skill to work and relate across cultures. It's based on more than 20 years of research. And at the CQ Center, we develop programs, workshops, certifications, and online tools to help individuals and organizations improve intercultural effectiveness and hopefully reach strategic planning goals. Our mission is to build bridges and remove barriers for working and relating across cultures. A little bit about myself. My name is Kelsey Deary. I've worked for the CQ Center for several years. I'm one of the senior business consultants, and I'm currently living in Cascais, Portugal with my husband and our 2-year-old son. And this is my very first time moderating a webinar, so exciting to be here today and to do this. Now, I will let our esteemed panelists introduce themselves. And Maggie, I'm going to tap on you first to introduce yourself. Then we'll have Sherry make her introduction, and then we'll have Chad introduce himself. And we'll go from there.
Thank you so much, Kelsey. I'm so pleased to join everyone today. Hello to everyone. My name is Dr. Maggie Mahoney. I'm here in Houston, Texas, in the United States. I am the Director of Global Engagement at the University of Houston. So I help operationalize our internationalization strategy for the university. I have my doctorate of education focused in global competence development. And in that, I did a lot of research on global and cultural competence. And I was able to serve as a doctoral intern already many moons ago with the Cultural Intelligence Center, where I actually was able to co-author a reflection journal with the CQ Center called the CQ Credential Equity and Inclusion Masterclass. And at the University of Houston, I work on programs like our Global Competence Accelerator, and I focus on global career readiness, some of the things that we're going to talk to y'all about today. So glad to join you all. Thanks so much, and we look forward to sharing. So Sherry, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Maggie, and hello, everyone. My name is Sherry DeClerc, and I'm an Assistant Dean for Graduate Initiatives and Academic Innovation at Michigan State University's Broad College of Business. I've been working with Kelsey for many years and with CQ for even more years than that. Lynn Van Dyne, who was one of the people that created this assessment, actually was on faculty at our college. And so we were, I think, early adopters of leveraging the CQ. I will say personally, I got my PhD at Michigan State in higher ed and lifelong education. And I started my education abroad experiences as an undergrad back a few years ago. And I'm really excited. I'm passionate about this area of helping people to understand and operate effectively across cultures. And I started my own experience with an undergrad study abroad in years ago. And we went to London in the UK, and it's fabulous. But since that time, I've been able to go to about 20 different countries with students through this. And I think it's just amazing to me to think about how much, even for myself, every time I go someplace, how much I didn't know before I started learning and understanding how different cultures operate. And I think that's a critical skill set for our students. Jen?
Perfect. Thank you, Sherry. All right, everyone. Happy Monday. Thanks for joining. My name is Chad Gaydon, and I work in the International Students and Scholars Office at Columbia University in New York City. I have worked in the field of international and intercultural education for 25 years. This June marks my 25th year. And I've worked with both incoming and outbound students, as well as scholars. And now I'm also working with the families of incoming students and scholars. I'm a teacher by training. I went to school to be a foreign language teacher, a German teacher to be more specific. And I've taught almost all grade levels. middle school, high school, adults, university. I've had a chance even to teach intercultural communication as part of an intensive in-service teacher training program to foreign language teachers, which really helped me also grow as an interculturalist, as an educator, thinking about the connection of language and culture in foreign language education. I had the opportunity to serve as a fellow at the Summer Institute for Intercultural Communication in Portland, Oregon. I guess that's almost 10 years ago now. And I'm also a returned Peace Corps volunteer, and I'm very, very proud of my service in Ukraine from 2004 to 2006. So with that, I will turn it back over to our fabulous moderator today, Kelsey.
Thank you. Thank you all. Where I'd like to begin is by having you all share how you came to begin utilizing CQ. Sherry, I know, as you mentioned, we've been working together for several years. You've been using CQ in your programs. Could you share a bit more about how you are using CQ with your students in your graduate programs? And then what are some of the goals for students to get out of the program once they finish their MBA?
Sure, happy to talk about that. So for us, the primary place that we've used this very consistently as a tool is in our executive MBA program. And what we do essentially is to have all of the students, as they come into the program, they take the T1 to get a baseline of where they're where they are. The program is very team-based, and so we've used that then from the very beginning at orientation to talk about CQ, to help them to understand their scores and to think about how they're going to use that knowledge to build those team relationships and to be effective within their team. So it really is a cornerstone from the very beginning. And then we have a global marketplace experience, a study abroad immersion that is required for all students. They can either do it by traveling, or we have a domestic version as well. And as a part of that course, so it's a non-course thing in the beginning, but then it moves into being a part of the course. And it's critical because we have them bring it back up, think about, refresh themselves about where they were and maybe what's changed along the way. And then we leverage the Expand Your Borders book as the required reading for that particular course. We have them write a global, like a personal development plan related to their CQ pieces. And then after their international experience, we have them do a reflection on it. So we've been very intentional about having them understand something, read something, learn something, experience something, reflect on that, right? So this kind of holistic view of leveraging the tools. We also began, I don't know, maybe you know, Kelsey, 5 or 6 years ago, leveraging the CQ modules as an additional tool for, I'll say, forcing them to dig deeper into the curriculum and what that means. And so now for that course, the syllabus really, I'm just pulled it up here, I think 20% of it is their action plan. They get graded for doing the T2, and also another 20% is the global action plan reflection. And then the E modules are, so really about 60% of the grades in that course are really based on either the modules, the reflection, the planning, and kind of pulling that together. And they take the T2 after they return from the experience as a way of kind of wrapping that up and then thinking about what's changed. So it's also, we then leverage that data, the change from their T1 to T2, as part of our AACSB goals. So business school is accredited by the AACSB, and we have 4 goals for this particular program. One of them is global competence. And so we're really heavily using the T1 and the T2 as a way of helping to understand, have students really adjusted in what they know, right? And so we can talk maybe more about that later, but I think that hopefully that helps Kelsey get us started.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Sherry. And in pivoting to Maggie, I would love for you to share a little bit more about your story, how you came to CQ, and really more specifically, talk more about the Global Competence Accelerator.
Thanks so much, Sherry. And I mean, Kelsey and Sherry, I was taking notes in yours to look at just the ways that you structured that. It's so helpful to kind of see how y'all are doing it there, so we can look at how we're doing it here or how we want to. So at the University of Houston, our mission within the Institute for Global Engagement is to develop global citizens. And we say that, and we have global programs, but how do we know we're doing that? How do we know that we're delivering on that and our students are really becoming more developed global citizens? They're ready to enter the global workforce and leave here better prepared. And so we did a lot of research since the pandemic on what kind of assessments could we do, what kind of curriculum could we do with our co-curricular programs that we offer, with our curricular programs even. And so what came of that, we just are finishing our first year pilot program of our Global Competence Accelerator. And I'm going to drop the link in the chat just so y'all have it here. And let me try that again. So we found this as an option to be able to do complementary education for our students as they go through these global engagement programs. So that could be learning abroad or study abroad. It could be our Global Citizens credential, which is a really great credential that we have. You're able to check it out on our website as well. Maybe it's students going through the Peace Corps prep program. Maybe it's students who are doing a global internship. We wanted to complement that with some intentional focus on developing and putting those pieces together and developing global competence of each of our students. So the Global Competence Accelerator is a workshop. It's a 2-hour workshop that also includes the CQ assessment. In our research and our prep, we found that the tenets of global competence very well mirror what CQ's subdimensions are. And we felt really strongly that this would be a great assessment for what we were working on. And then we needed to figure out the funding piece of it, which I'll talk about in a minute, because we all come from different institutions with different availabilities in terms of resources. And so we looked at the solutions and we did this pilot year, and it was a way for us to start looking at, are we being intentional to teach them? And our goal audience is all students, but we're finding this year that this has been primarily for undergraduate students. We've intentionally reached out to students on faculty-led programs or on reciprocal exchanges within Ed Abroad, or to our students in the GCC, but we've also worked with work study students in our Cougar cupboard is our food cupboard on campus. We've worked with students as part of student organizations so that we can look at their global environment and see how they're really understanding it and becoming more effective as team members. We also include the faculty and staff who advise or manage these programs as well, because that's such an important piece too. We know that mentorship helps that reflection piece. And honestly, one of the biggest pieces of purpose behind this is access. So we understand that not all students have the ability to go abroad, and maybe they feel that they self-select out of going abroad because they have too many other barriers. Maybe they have responsibilities, especially for students who are underrepresented in Ed Abroad and students who can't necessarily get abroad. This program helps students go global right here in Houston. And so it increases access to those underrepresented student groups that maybe don't get global programs enough already. This is a way for us to further enhance our global local efforts that we call our global initiatives areas here at the University of Houston. So we've really enjoyed this. I can't wait to start diving into the results of the T1 and the T2, which is the pre-test and the post-test. Some of our faculty-led groups are going to start taking that post-test this week to look at the data, but to also look at the feedback of how did they grow and what are their reflections saying. And I'm just loving, Sherry, the structure of what you put to it. One of the things I tell our students is that it's not necessarily rocket science. I literally had a future rocket scientist in one of my workshops last month. Like literally she's graduating and going work for NASA. But what this is intentionality. It's reflection. And research tells us over and over again in higher education, student development, that reflection is really what locks in that learning. And so I feel like this is a great tool for it. Yeah, so really loving what we're doing here on that.
Thank you so much for that, Maggie. And you brought up something that is more that global concept of internationalization at home.
Yes.
That's
so important.
It is.
I mean, if you think about the stats of open doors from the Institute for International Education, maybe your university sends 5% of your students abroad. Maybe international students make up 10% of your student population, but how much do they engage with domestic students? At UH, we try to take the approach. We're saying it and we're working on following through with, we're all students, we're all Cougs, and how do we connect across different types of student experiences. And that means not everybody can go abroad, but we all have global experiences. We are lucky to live in a city like Houston, the most diverse, large city in the nation, rivaling New York. It just depends on the year, I guess, Chad. But you know, we have so much to offer here from all of the different neighborhoods of Houston and all the different cultures. If you want to eat some good food, you should come down here because there's so many different types of folks that live all around the city. But how much do we cross borders, which are literally avenues here, which are literally boulevards, and go to a different neighborhood? And this is helping equip students and then leverage what we already have right here at home to connect across cultures, but also to connect across generations,
Yeah.
styles. Culture means so many different things. So how are we thinking about that? It doesn't mean you have to get on an airplane to be able to do
Yeah.
that.
Thank you so much. And Chad, I'm very excited for you to share
Yeah.
how you came to learn about CQ. And also, as someone who is newly implementing CQ, I would love for you to share more about that process of how you ultimately landed on CQ as a tool to implement in what you're working on.
Ed, you
Yeah.
should definitely tell the story.
Yeah, okay, all right. Twist my arm, mate. Yeah, so I am relatively new to CQ. We've started using it only about a year ago, a little bit more or so here at Columbia. So I'll backtrack a little bit. So I was already familiar with training and assessment tools that were kind of out there in the field, specifically, more specifically, I guess, to those that really focus on intercultural competence and development. But my role in ISSO here at Columbia focuses holistically, or at least part of my role focuses holistically on international student success. And underneath that, I was brought into Columbia to help design and oversee and develop a co-curricular leadership and professional development program for Columbia's a pretty large international student population. We're a very decentralized university. The International Students and Scholars Office serves all departments, all campuses of the university, but each of the individual schools is a culture in and of themselves, right? They have their own admissions office, they have their own advising office, their own career office, and even some of them have their own support specifically for international students. But ISSO is comprehensive for the entire campuses, the entire university. So as we developed this leadership and professional development program, I knew coming into it based on just my background and experiences and things that I knew that intercultural competence was going to be a piece of this. It needed to be. But I needed to find a tool that aligned more broadly, that wasn't just focused on this one little piece of intercultural competence that could be used for the entire leadership and professional development program. And it was one of those moments that I just put out into the universe, like, I need a sign. And the universe did not disappoint. So it was just over a year ago that I was leaving the NAFSA Association of International Educators conference in New Orleans. I was boarding the plane, and the plane was filled with this like renewed energy of the international education community, and of course this post conference exhaustion. So I kind of sank into my airplane seat thinking, okay, I gotta rest now. I've just had a week full of all this excitement. And coincidentally, to my luck, sitting right next to me was Maggie. And so Maggie and I had this inspiring conversation about CQ over our complimentary soft drinks and our airplane pretzels. And I learned all about the work Maggie was doing at the University of Houston and was actually re-energized again. I didn't think I had it in me after a week of conferencing, but I was excited when I got off the plane. And I shared with her in the conversation a little bit about what we were trying to build at Columbia with this leadership and professional development program, which I'll tell you a bit about in just a moment. And Maggie spoke very highly of CQ and encouraged me to look into it. It was not one that it is not something that I really knew much about. It may have come up in a list here or there, but I had no kind of personal connection to it until I had the chance to sit next to Maggie on this flight. So it wasn't long after that, when I returned to campus, that I reached out to Kelsey and we started to learn a little bit more.
Yeah, I think we really like nerded out about the fact that it has like it does do that internal development of how are we global citizens, or like what is our intercultural
Yes.
competence, but it needed the so what. I needed the so what
Yeah.
piece in that. Okay, so what are we going to go out and do with this? That some of the assessments didn't quite provide and didn't have the action plan in it. And so
Yeah.
I feel like once you realized, and I just remember having that part of the
Yeah.
conversation, like, oh, and it has a career piece. It has a let's go
Right.
do something piece with it. So
Right. That the reflection and the intentionality about what it means when you use this tool, right? And not just the, okay, now I've got this, now what type of thing. Exactly what you're saying. So real quick, I'll just tell you about the program that we've implemented it in. And again, it's a co-curricular program, a leadership and professional development program. It's called GLASS. I'll put the link into the chat for you if anyone is interested to see what it is. GLASS stands for Global Leadership, Advancing Student Success. And we've designed it around 3 focus areas: professional learning and development, interpersonal and intercultural communication, and global mindfulness and inclusion. So the leadership program, right? Leadership programs can be developed in so many ways, but where were we coming from within ISSO? So we focused on these things that we could bring to it. So professional learning and development includes things like personal and professional branding, becoming an ideal team player. So we have workshops on those types of things. Interpersonal and intercultural communication, things on public speaking in the US contexts, and resolving intercultural misunderstandings are 2 examples of workshops that fall under that. And for global mindfulness inclusion, we have workshops on adopting a leader mindset and discussions on ethical leadership kind of globally and locally and what that means. So as I was saying, CQ is very closely connected with all 3 of these focus areas that we've chosen for our program. And it allows us to approach leadership and professional development for international students without going in with this kind of deficit mentality that often comes up. Like, what are the international students
yes.
lacking when they come to the United States, right? Like, and I didn't want to focus on that because they bring so much, right? So we could actually build on the strengths of our already globally mobile students by being intentional about the areas of growth using the CQ. So I hope that helps answer, Kelsey.
Absolutely. That 3 perfect answers. Thank you so much for that. And, right now, I mean, so many higher education institutions, our partners, ask the question, what do students get out of using CQ in the long run? So from engaging with our partners across the country and the globe, I know a big focus, especially right now, is on learning outcomes and, of course, on career readiness. And so I'd love to dive more into what are you all seeing from your students as their outcomes, and what are you doing to enhance those outcomes? And maybe I'll pivot back to you, and maybe you could elaborate more on what you're doing with that global career readiness and what outcomes you're seeing right now from students.
Absolutely. So we put global career readiness into all of our student-facing global programs, whether a lot or a little. It just kind of depends on our bandwidth and the program. So I just want to be real here. You do what your team can do. And so everyone on this call, let's just get started with what your team can do. And so we make sure to focus on global career readiness, whether it's a small student group that went abroad, maybe it was even a 1-week service learning type of program, or it was a full semester or year on an exchange program. We have our students on our Global Citizens Credential program that are intentionally connecting all of their global experiences and coming together. They use the CQ at the end in their capstone. But we talk about what they're going to do with all of these experiences. The so what piece is very crucial for us. And that so what piece, said more kind of formally, is global career readiness. And so we focus on global career readiness as, are you putting this on your resume? Are you able to articulate the skills that you're gaining? You just had a really great intercultural conversation. You were able to connect across difference in that kind of reflection practice case that we just did in maybe one of our debrief sessions. But you maybe don't know how to delineate this on your resume or in your cover letter, or maybe you don't know how to speak intelligibly about it in a networking event. It takes practice to go from knowing how to navigate the subway system in Paris to understanding how to develop creative solutions in a new environment, right? One's going to connect with an employer, another isn't going to connect with the employer. So with part of the GCA, we focus directly on global career readiness, and we know that this is important because one of another higher education association, the National Association of Colleges and Employers, or NACE, they've outlined 8 career readiness competencies, and they didn't just make these up. They came up with them by talking with employers and looking at what do employers need out of career ready graduates. And so some of those career readiness pieces include communication, critical thinking, and teamwork. And I'm going to drop this in the chat as well so y'all can see the 8 career readiness competencies. One of them is equity and inclusion. And this previously was called global fluency, and they changed it in 2021 or so to equity and inclusion, which also still includes connecting across difference. Right. And so if you look at the equity and inclusion career readiness competency, it talks about actively contributing to inclusive practices, seeking global cross-cultural interactions, seeking those, right? And enhancing your understanding of people from different backgrounds, eliminating barriers from individuals so that you can bring people together. You can connect across difference very effectively. And that's what CQ is all about. And so we use this NACE career readiness competency. We work with our career services office, and we talk about helping them to develop what is your takeaway from your global experience, whether it's an internship right here in Houston in a global kind of field, or whether it's going abroad, whether it's taking a global class, or maybe you took a foreign language class even, or were part of a cultural organization. And so one of the tools that we help our students to do this is our career global engagement resume example. So I'm going to also put that in the chat. And this shows them examples of how they can put some of this on their resume and some of the phrases. And honestly, the phrasing really helps students, especially undergraduate students, but even our master's students, because maybe they kind of missed this in their undergrad and they're really ready to get the job. Chad, I see you shaking your head like, yeah, some of our master's students still also need that. Talking about those transferable skills and how they have better resource and crisis management. And then they can tell a funny story about how they got lost in Lima, right? And how they got to manage a crisis of getting disconnected without a cell phone. Or how they have better perspective taking and increased empathy because they had an internship where they had to work with someone from a different cultural background. And so it's pointing out the obvious, helping them speak about it, helping them work through it, but keeping the focus on, okay, and remember, what is the so what piece for y'all? At the University of Houston, we are really focused on our students in terms of social mobility support, in terms of getting them jobs, in terms of knowing that honestly, many of our students are already working full-time as they are undergraduates and graduate students. And so we're not coming to them with rocket science on this either, but we're being thoughtful. We're being intentional to get them to be authentic about who they are, because so many of our students are also from multicultural backgrounds. We're a Hispanic serving institution. We're an Asian American, Native American, Pacific Islander serving institution. So we have students from lots of different backgrounds. We want them to incorporate themselves into their career readiness as they go out into the world. And so I just think it takes thoughtfulness across our programs. You can do it with maybe a similar learning outcome in some of your global programs. Maybe you do it honestly, we started in a pretty easy way because this is hard. We started just by using this resume resource, and bringing it to all of our programs. And then now we're adding it in as a learning outcome. We're starting to develop more workshops about it. We have a global after grad workshop and a resource website. So I just think it takes bites at a time, but it's really helpful for students.
And I think that kind of pivots nicely. I would love to, Sherry, if you could kind of dive into more of CQ in terms of enhancing a student's resume in your program and tangible job placement once they've graduated from your program. Are there things that you could share about what you're doing with your EMBA students?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, all of what Maggie said was just really so great. And I think we take a little bit different angle to it, perhaps, because for the EMBA students in particular, they're all fully employed while they're doing the program, right? And yet, what we find is that many students are having to deal with, work with, and be effective in global teams, right? The world has just gotten so, whether it's global teams like people are literally working in Portugal or India or wherever else around the globe, or they just come from different backgrounds and experiences. And so the work that we do in helping the students understand like the knowledge, the action, the strategy, the drive, which are all the aspects of CQ, is really helpful at helping individuals to understand better, like where are they coming from and where are other people coming from. And then for us, the key is how do we help you to understand so that you can work more effectively with people that are not exactly like you, right? And so that really becomes the key. Communication skills, like how you communicate, how you negotiate a sales deal is different in Mexico than what it might be in Germany. Like all of those kinds of things are really important to people being able to be more effective and impactful in their jobs. And so for us, it's not even so much how are they putting it on their resume, but how are they actually learning and changing their behaviors in the workplace so that they can have a bigger impact, and also so that they can change and influence what's going on in their organization so other people can have that bigger impact. So we spend a lot of time in the program talking about teams and the fact that everyone on the team is different. They come from different perspectives, different backgrounds, different life experiences, and that happens in the real world, not just in our classrooms. And so really giving them the tool set to be able to understand and then to think, and this is the part we talked about earlier, to be intentional about not just like I heard it, I learned it, but I'm doing something with it, I'm applying it, I'm hopefully experiencing it maybe in a different country, and then I'm going to come back over and think about that a little bit more deeply so that it sinks in. So those are some of the pieces that we really hone in on.
And I'm curious if how students' reactions from their pre to their post might play into some of this. And when we were prepping for our conversation, you shared a really interesting anecdote about the changes from your pre or T1 to post T2 scores with your students.
Yeah, no, it's actually pretty interesting because we have a pretty broad variety of students. The EMBA program is large, typically 100-ish students. Some of them, when they start this experience and write their development plan, have never been outside the country, or if maybe they've been to, Canada or Mexico, but they haven't been broader, farther than that. And some of them travel extensively, have lived in many countries, travel all the time for work, and have a lot of different experiences. And they go into the CQ having expectations for themselves about what they think they know, right? And so they complete the T1 and they're either surprised or not surprised about the results on that. They go through the program and this course and their global experience, and then they do the T1. And oftentimes, like I don't have a percentage number, but often people's CQ numbers go down, particularly on the knowledge and the strategy, right? And they're shocked and sometimes angry about the fact that their score went quote unquote down. And for us, the way that we look at this is change in their score is good, regardless of the direction of that change. So if I thought that I knew a lot, and now I've had this experience, I've learned about more things, I've read the book and I've done some new experiences, and now I realize that there is so much more in the world to know, that the what I thought I knew is actually like this because the percentage is lower, right? And so that's been a really interesting piece too, as they reflect back on what more there is to know. Like I've learned so much and now I know there's so much more to know, kind of a thing, right? Yeah, so that's been fun.
Sherry, I love that. And I see a lot of faculty that ask that question of, what happens if the scores go down? Are you less effective? And you just gave me such a great perspective in our prep call on the fact that it is growth. Even a change in score is such growth, and that's really important. I think also it's so important to think about the different applications of CQ on a program like yours, which is very curricular based. It's in a class, it's required of the students to take the pre and the post assessment. They have to do all of these things to get points. Whereas something like the Global Competence Accelerator, it's a 2-hour workshop. And it's not necessarily a full program where they get to be here for multiple touch points. They can for our global citizens credential, but that's kind of just starting. But oftentimes we only get to have a captive audience one time. And so we're working on expanding using the CQ for more curricular reasons. I mean, for more curricular applications, excuse me, because you really get to dive into the specifics of teams and what is your approach to working across difference. And I see somebody asked in the chat, does any of your curriculum address conflict-based issues on cultural differences? And I bet it does. Like what happens with conflict if you're dealing with a Middle Eastern country culture or an East Asian country culture? You have to teach that for business, but that's not something that we can get into in depth as much as y'all could in a class. So if there are opportunities, I feel like I see this sitting so well with courses, but it can live co-curricularly. And we see that in mine and Chad's program as well.
Yeah, and I think that the benefit of having it in a course
yeah.
is that you can force students to do, they do it because you tell them to do
Yeah.
it, generally
Our program
speaking.
is definitely opt-in.
Right. But I think, to the point about conflict, where I see it really having the biggest impact is understanding, right? So you can eliminate some of those misconceptions or misinterpretation of behaviors or actions or nonverbals or whatever, if you just understand that that person is coming at it from a different perspective, right? I think it can avoid, it helps people to maybe avoid some blunders that they would unintentionally get themselves into. And then if and when there is a conflict, it also gives them some tools to be able to navigate that conflict more effectively, understanding maybe, the tendency for directness or not so directness and that kind of thing. And so I think all the way around, it really can be helpful for people to navigate and work with others that are different than them. And that applies to whether it's in a business setting or other kinds of settings as well.
And I love that too. That's kind of touching on what Chad, you said earlier about it's not about deficit-based approaches. So it's not about how to handle conflict. It's how to preempt it with focusing on understanding. It's not what we're missing and problems that happen. It's starting by establishing understanding across difference and working well effectively across difference. That's such a good point too. And as you're developing these programs, is that you can be intentional to develop either a curricular or a co-curricular program that uses this as an asset-based approach to making sure we see what we do have. I always use the Popeye muscle. What kind of efforts do we need to grow the Popeye muscle to get stronger in your CQ? I need to make undergraduates laugh somehow. So, yeah.
I'll quickly
Chad?
jump in on the conflict thing real quick, and then I don't want to divert us too much, but so for co-curricular, we do a lot with cultural misunderstandings, and it resonates with students when they can kind of give advice to someone in a case study, right? And we focus on one of the biggest stresses I know from working with international students is when they have to do group work for a specific course, and so much of their time is time and effort and energy and outcomes of the course is related to group work, right? So we can use case studies of students from all over the world working together in a group, and they can see themselves in that and give advice to the people in the group as an outsider, right? And then we take that and expand it to, okay, what does that look like in the work world, right? Depending on where you're going to be after graduation. We actually work with a lot of graduate students who come to us with quite a bit of work experience already, and then they come back for another degree or a graduate degree. And so then they can very easily say, well, I've seen this play out in this setting or this setting, but giving them the lens of okay, you need to resolve this. Here's the situation of a different group of students, not you, right? A different group of students working together in a group to finish a project. And they can very quickly see where this conflict comes up and arises because they have personal connections to it, but it's easier for them to kind of point it out in a different situation. So those are really fun when we talk about communication and what that means if you're a leader, if you're a manager later on, and how oftentimes in a group of students, like the manager role is missing, but leadership doesn't always need to be based on a title, right? Every time you're in a situation, right, leadership takes so many different forms, right? And how successful holistically you and the group can be when someone actually takes some of those leadership roles.
What a good program.
Yeah, and this is perfect because, Chad, I would love for you to elaborate a little bit more because I feel you're using CQ in a pretty unique way with your focus on international students and your intentionality to reconnect with those students after they take the assessment and knowing the 4CQ capabilities, how it relates to their student development after completing the workshops they participate in. And I also love how you're focusing on connecting CQ strengths to help them with goal setting across the board for their just overall holistic development. So I was wondering if you could dive in more into that and how you're emphasizing goal setting and tracking progress.
Yeah, great question. So I'll preface this again by saying the GLASS program is completely co-curricular. Participation is completely optional, which creates other challenges along the way. But it's not embedded in a course, and my office isn't within an academic department, so we don't have any of that. Um, and we're still kind of developing it. It's one of those where we're offering it, we're refining it, we're developing it based on lots of feedback, including things that are coming back through the use of the CQ within the program. So all of that to say, we have perhaps more flexibility than others, Sherry, maybe more flexibility than you, to make adjustments along the way to meet the needs of the current needs of the students, because the program isn't yet institutionalized. It's not, oh, as we've done it this way type of mentality. We're really trying to put pieces together now and figure out where we fit. We also, ISSO is not a career office. Every school, every department at Columbia has its own very successful career education, career development office. And we're not that. We're not trying to step on toes of the other departments in the offices, but rather add something to enhance the experiences of students in all departments. And we work with students, undergraduate, master's, PhD students in every discipline on all the campuses, right? So it is quite a unique situation in that way. So I have to give a shout out real quick to my colleague, James Lee, who's on my team here, for really being intentional about what you're asking, Kelsey, and finding ways to prioritize goal setting with our students. He's very good at creating practical tools for this, and can bring these kind of abstract ideas of that we come up with within reflection and intentionality, and make it into a tool that students can actually use. So within the program, he has come up with this tiered system that allows the participants in GLASS. And again, we don't have a cohort model. The students can take part anytime they're enrolled at Columbia, right? So, in their first semester, they might be very eager and they might do a few things and then get bogged down by later that semester, second semester, and come back to it in their third semester. We have no kind of you enter it once and you finish it once. It's come and go as you can throughout your time at Columbia, which creates other challenges, right? But it allows for that flexibility. But through the program, we've created this tiered system that allows students to receive a digital badge that can appear on their LinkedIn for completing a certain number of offerings within the program. And those offerings have to be differentiated between those three focus areas I mentioned before. So they can't just take the intercultural communication stuff or just the professional development. They've got to take a mix of all of them, as well as the initial CQ assessment, right? So that's part of getting the certificate, because we build in the reflection on that. After they take that and we debrief what has come from the results, that's when they use these tools that James creates to really plan ahead to take, okay, during my time here at Columbia, I can take these other GLASS workshops that perhaps will help me build or strengthen certain areas. Something when we started the CQ, I figured, since we're not working with the entire population of Columbia, although we don't turn anyone away that's interested. The program was designed for the international students, and my initial instinct was that their CQ drive would be quite high. And the assessment came back and said, yes, it was quite high, right? There's some intrinsic and extrinsic motivations for this particular group of globally mobile students, right? They're already here in the United States. So that came back that way. And I wasn't really sure how the rest of the areas of the CQ would come back. But we did notice that, the other three areas were lower than drive for the students as a whole. And we then, as we were building this program, could really focus on bringing in speakers, focusing the workshops around the areas where right now, when we look at the total report, where we can see growth, right? And I made note in the knowledge and CQ knowledge, like leadership, in CQ strategy planning, and in CQ action, verbal and nonverbal communication were areas that this group of students at this time tended to score a little bit lower. And as in all of those, based on those three focus areas, we can easily fit things in, right? So we upped the number of things related to the intercultural misunderstandings workshops, the US, the public speaking in a US context workshop, right? We offered more of those throughout the semester. We took a group of students to an improv class as well, because we noted that, you know,
That's so cool.
nonverbal communication, and all of that already
Yeah.
fits within the outline of our program. It's not that we're changing the framework of the program, but we are able to connect the needs at the moment to these three focus areas and dive or get a little bit deeper into the weeds of what is actually needed. So that really is good. And the students can see, okay, what's coming up in fall, what's coming up in spring. They have a tool to say, you know, these are the areas I want to grow my CQ in, and these are the workshops that will align to it. And we just make sure that we have more of those types on the schedule because we know that's where, or we guess that's where they'll want to grow just based on where the scores are. So then they plan. Oh, sorry, I cut you off.
No,
Go
I'm
on.
just saying that's incredible adaptive curriculum. And the fact that you're like getting these mini modules and you can pick and choose based on student needs to meet them where they are. That's such a smart
100%.
approach to this.
Well, I love that we get the group assessment, right? We can pull that and we can see, like, are these numbers changing? And then perhaps, you know, over a course of another semester, something else will shift. And then we can fit that into the program. That's one of the benefits of not being in a curriculum, in that we have that flexibility where we can add another speaker that brings in this dynamic or this dynamic. Again, we don't change the overall framework of the program, but because CQ aligns so much with what our focus areas are, we can, in a given semester or in a given year, add that in, and we can point students in the direction, right? The students, we can say, you know what, if you're looking to focus on this area, these are the kind of workshops that we're offering that will relate to that area.
Yeah.
And we don't tell them that they have to grow in the areas that they're low in. They might want to grow in the areas they're already high in, right?
Yeah.
But it gives them the language. The CQ gives them the language and the discourse then to talk about that, as you were also saying, when they're networking. I mean, networking is the scariest thing for so many of my students, right? But they're given this discourse and the language to use based on things like that. So.
Well, and I think it also gives you a lot of data maybe for your administration too, because let's say using today's current political climate and everything happening in higher ed, especially with international students, I mean, I want to go there a minute. Like, let's say we're assuming as administrators that international students are now becoming weaker in this or less in this, or maybe their self-efficacy piece of CQ drive is lower. We can use this also not only for data in a conglomerate kind of way to show, no, they're still pretty self-confident, they're working through this, or maybe they're not. And this semester we need to adapt to maybe some changing realities to focus more on a self-efficacy workshop, but maybe next time it's it's a different kind of component based on what's happening, maybe based on research trends, maybe based on travel trends, maybe based on who knows what. Oh, that's so smart too. And it also, the adaptive curriculum lets your administrators know, like, we're being responsive to students right where they are right now. That's a great,
Yeah,
that's a great
I think that
approach.
that's really key. And the one thing I want to tag on as well, that what Chad was saying, is this idea of it's personal, right? Like, they're getting data that helps them to understand where they are and how that relates to the worldwide norms and all of that. But it also is not us saying, like, this score is low, you need to make it higher. It really is helping. And we have our students too think about, like, of your scores, these are the ways that this particular dimension may show up and help you to be successful. If you're in sales, you might want to think about this. If you're in a different role, and then helping them to decide. And that's why I put the prompts that we have, but we're very loose in how much we structure what we ask them to think about and reflect on or to grow on, because it's really, we want it to be, we used to be very, much more scripted, like, say this, say this, say this, say this. And we realized that that doesn't necessarily apply to everyone. So we really took it back and we said, you need to come up with some personal or professional goals related to this. And we're not evaluating whether or not your goals are good or bad, right or wrong.
Yeah.
We do try to push on them, making sure that they're, specific and measurable, and that they have some kind of accountability and that whole SMART piece. But what those goals are needs to be personal, because we find that that allows them to really apply it in a way that's going to be helpful for themselves and for their own careers.
Yeah. I mean, that's telling me that our facilitators of the CQ assessment, they need to be really good at this. So are we making sure that our facilitators on campus are really well trained and we're connecting with the CQ to get all those resources so that they can be adaptive in the moment? That our mentors and program directors who create this curriculum or these co-curricular programs, are they really being as adaptive as they could possibly be? I think that's such great points.
No, it really is. And now we're down to the last 10 minutes, which is this, for me, this time has gone by so fast, but I would love to take a look at the chat, and Prudence, maybe you can help.
And Kelsey, I saw one that I would love to bring up as we're picking up next ones. Someone asked how to think big yet start small. And so they're in the public, I mean, they're in the public service sector and they have a limited budget. And how do we get started thinking big, but starting small? And that's something that I feel like UH does really well. We're a very large institution. We have over 47,000 students, but this program started without even having a CQ facilitator on campus. And we use the CQ Center to facilitate some of our group CQ debriefs. And we did it across some of our leadership teams and some of our advising teams so that they could understand what CQ is, so that they could start laying the groundwork and getting interest built up for it. And so I think if you're going to look for how to start small, it's maybe getting your leadership team to do a CQ Pro assessment to better understand it as leaders and understand yourselves so that that can be taken into each of the different teams. And that's a great way to start. And then maybe the next year you can have the budget or create the budget or even apply for grants. So one of the things that we also do is apply for grants to be able to support CQ. And we're continuing to work on that. I just submitted one last Friday before last, actually, to help with some more global competence accelerator efforts. But, if you look at it as kind of leaders to team members to students, you can start small, but still think the concept is important and make it a focus in your teams and in your organizations, because you can talk about CQ and don't shy away from talking about it, even if you don't have the exact meaning of it. Focusing on team effectiveness, using the tenets and the sub dimensions of CQ is so important.
That was great. And Sherry, Chad, do you have anything to add to that question?
I'll just say partnerships, right? As we grow, I have to be better about not just using it within my group, but my colleagues who are in the career offices and other offices and departments. I need to get them on board with what we're doing as well, so they can continue to talk it up as well. We have the big dream of, we have 13,000 enrolled international students at any given time, right? Like how do we get it to the masses in that way, right? And we don't have that many going through it now. So I've got to be better about advocating it with my colleagues and talking it up that way.
Yeah, and I made a comment. There's some really good resources available, right? So when we started, we still sometimes, depending on what we've got going on, we bring in somebody from CQ to come over and do a half-day workshop or those kinds of things. There's facilitation sessions. The MyCQ is kind of an individual way of students diving in more deeply without having it to be so facilitated or managed by someone on our team. So that might be a way to move forward as well. But I do think also getting some data, whether it's like numbers or the changes or anecdotal feedback from the students, to be able to demonstrate the value of it to faculty members that may want to incorporate it in, and leveraging, and there's a lot of kind of questions around DEI and political climate or whatever. I mean, the way that we think about this is people are still people, and we have to be able to work effectively with them. And so whether or not you think that, the letters DEI are like a thing to talk about or not, the premise underscoring this, which is we want people to be able to be successful at collaborating, working together, understanding each other, is one that I think is really hard to argue against.
And that actually ties into a question that just came through. does the current political and challenging social environment the country has been experiencing regarding a variety of cultural factors impact some of what Chad you described or CQ more broadly? I think Sherry, you I think in some ways kind of answered the question. Chad, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so again, my focus working in International Students and Scholars Office is the international student population, but I think our focus we're using the CQ as part of a leadership and professional development program. This is related very much to careers. This is related very much to global readiness, what happens after, and this whole idea of lifelong learning. I mean, when we think about professional development through the GLASS program, we tell our students straight out, right? Like when you get a job, it's expensive for your employer to give you professional development, right? You're getting now professional development throughout your time as a student. Start now and make this a part of your career, right? This ongoing professional development. We know that you're going to be leaders in your respective fields someday. And leader, again, is not related to a title that you have, but whatever position you have. And this is giving you one lens to which to view it. And there are other leadership and programs that students get involved in with the campus, or just out in the world. So this is just another one of them that they can add to the larger repertoire for their resume and things like that.
Love that. I think I'll jump in as well, especially coming from Texas. We we are in a challenging climate for folks who work on DEI, and that's not a focus for public higher education institutions any longer. And what is a focus is our mission. And so I think that starting with that and always being driven is so important. It is about creating global citizens. Our mission statement and vision statement include together, UH helps prepare every graduate to be a global citizen. So we focus on global and cultural competence development. And that's where this all comes in. And it can be looked at in a different perspective. But what we're doing, just like Sherry said, is helping to teach students and help them practice how to work across difference in teams, as a big L leader or a little L leader. I love that, Chad. It's good to reinforce that we're all leaders, no matter what our title might be. And so I have worked very intentionally. I have crafted language that meets needs of where I'm at right now. And we could go into the weeds about this. We could feel certain types of ways, or we could just do the work. And I've done all three of those things, to be fair, but I will say, kind of in a moving us forward phase, it's doing the work, knowing how to do that based on our environment is important. Being culturally competent myself based on the environment that I'm in, I think that that is so important too. So even as you approach putting together these programs, it's all for working together in this global workforce. And I think that that's just so important.
And I think that leaves us with time to answer one more question. We had a question come through. Please expand on your IAH programs. How do you capture them and student participation in the assessments?
I'm assuming they're saying UH.
Maybe we could. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So we get students to opt into our program, and sometimes it's an optional part of other programs. And so we have them participate, and then we look at some of their feedback, but we also add in, we have developed a couple of feedback assessments so far, but we're thank you, Adola. Thank you so much. Internationalization at home. Again, it's an opt-in thing as much as possible, but we're trying to add it into certain groups, to make it part of a student's program, to make it part of their global citizens credential. So they do have to do it for that. But if they're in an internship program, we're trying to add it in to different versions of global local programs that we have here, and adding in some feedback assessments for some qualitative feedback that we can then use, like Sherry said, to show administrators, to show out that there's an ROI here, that students are articulating themselves on how to get kind of best impacts from this.
Thank you for that. Thank you, everyone. We have just about 1 minute left. And I'm so appreciative of everyone's time, all the participants that were able to join the session. And it was just great to get some of our partners together today. And just thank you all again for sharing
Thank you so much,
your
Kelsey.
time.
It was great to come together and talk.
Thank you.
Awesome. Everyone have a great day.
Thank you. Yes, have a great week, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.